tenjungi, tenzila, tenne, ngaranzo semgi, nganzin, si nyomu shanda jaya ge shiru chige, ta tela ya ene kapte shanga chirado kwa. Ngaranzo anda drabadin dangla yungi, tenshi shunyi mendo la jungshin jigden tsuyan den riksu gunli gyawashin tenshi reju tsamaya ka. Ten jung sayage tsik nivu digi shivuji resha ten sayadegi shenla ra leba. Shenla ra ma leba rawang dhruva kyone yao ma res. Ten jung sayadegi shenla ane ra leba shenla tenne si ta shaba samado pake penun degen meba chiya ma res. Tenshi chunyi mendo la jungshin jikden tsuyang ten jung sayadegi gyundriki tenri la soba ngaranzo jiga tongzhu ki ta nyamnyo yongde yade yidi ko gyugin la tenne tuksi yongde ba jigi di yidi ene tokpa taksam soro jigi mato pake penun menga ji ma res. Tenshi chunyi mendo la jungshin jikden tsuyang
Let me first pay salutation to Buddha Shakyamuni, who taught the truth of dependent origination, Pratitya Samubhada. And among all the great spiritual teachers of the world, one thing that really defines the Buddha as a unique teacher from the Buddhist point of view is his teaching on dependent origination. And dependent origination, Pratitya Samubhada, really captures the essence of Buddha's insight and Buddha's teaching. Now, when we look at the term itself, dependent origination, Pratitya Samubhada, and in Tibetan is Tenjung, which is composed of two syllables. One is dependent, and second, ten. The second is Jungwa, which is origination. And these two syllables really capture a powerful insight into the understanding of the nature of reality. The first, the word dependent, really indicates the basic truth, how everything is dependent upon each other. Nothing is independent. And it is through this dependence, which is the actual fundamental reality of everything. And then the second element, origination, points out how things come into being through this interrelatedness, through this dependence. So on the one hand, when you think about the concept of teaching on dependence, nothing is left that exists independently. But then we cannot conclude by saying, therefore, nothing exists. That's why the second element is important, because even though there are nothing that is independent, but through dependent relationships, things can come into being. And it is the understanding of that truth of dependent origination that can really help us, dispel, ignorance and misunderstanding about the nature of reality. So understanding dependent origination as the heart of the Buddha's teaching and the characteristic of Buddha as a teacher of dependent origination is really important.
And then, 나라도 삼루 로당 그 돈에 나 신의 사심부 쇼직 연데 애네 대단들에 년기 초들라 착심게야 나들 또서 먼지부 용에도 이들라 자원 두시 샤네 애네 지기 심내 지기 또서 당심 용야라고 차단 이부도 용야데 또 나르즈메 로데기 용데기도 와 자상가 안다 나와타고 우먼주고 최저가 나라 근시 세니 개월 로도 표존디 사분단에 별로 충저 유린도 로저 나라 매버더부 너여와 디지다게 통원 닝지 더버지 세니 가다슴 차단 이부되게 녀로 상황 서용거 여바 인도산에 저 꾼르벽에 펜베 삼바 꾼르 동에다 차나 대와다 되나 삼베 저 로다데 애니 시우지가 사셔무레스 애네 반단 다와타고 우먼주고 삼베 그도래야 최주기 유신 모송와 닝지 속으로 수하되 아니 산제베 최기 통모를 깨워 바로도 깨워 탐모를 깨워 닝지디 쉬우지 사셔버려도가
So how does this, why is this understanding of dependent origination important? Because if we examine our day-to-day experience of being in the world, each of us will recognize that at the heart of our existence is a strong sense of self, I. And when you lack the insight into dependent origination, our tendency to grasp at this self as real is going to be strong. Once you have a grasping at a self as something real, then the basis for division between I and you, self and others, arises. And on this basis, our reaction, emotions arise. Attachment to those who think are close to us, who are important to us, and aversion to the people that we see as different or maybe dangerous to us. So this aversion and attachment really arises on the basis of our perception of and grasping at sense of self. Therefore, along with the Buddha's teaching on dependent origination, the other important teaching is the teaching on compassion. And the importance of the compassion as the heart of Buddha's teaching can be recognized in Chandrakirti's text, Entering the Middle Way, where he compares, when he writes the salutation at the beginning of the text, unlike other texts and other masters, he chooses compassion to be the object of his salutation at the beginning. And when he pays homage to compassion, he compares compassion to the seed that is important at the beginning for spiritual growth. He compares it to the moisture in the middle that enables the seeds to grow. And he compares to the fruition at the result as well. So pointing out the importance of compassion throughout all stages of spiritual development. So when you combine compassion and wisdom of dependent origination, then you have the heart of the Buddha's teaching.
자, 대제 인도산에다 14번 남시에 유능 대의 주의로 유로 당매 통원이 14번 가고 있는 줄 써야 돼. 다 남부를 쉐버 지초 강나나야 퇴진원의 여바지나 나고다도 퇴진원의 여바지 판 진댕에게 로되기 애네 차당의 로되기 그 제용의 여바 인도산에 애네 능식이 천디 퇴진원의 여바지 나용의 여데 나고다도 주고 때내매 상바지가 타 쳐버지가 상로스의 인도산에 애네 가나 지금 그게 유딩의 여도지 로를 샤돼야 돼 미도 상바지가 생고 띵네 khoda chöba jiga samlukta ji de kashim burisha.
So as Buddhists, our task is to cultivate these two qualities, compassion and wisdom. And with respect to wisdom, as I spoke earlier, at the heart of which is the teaching on dependent origination, or in other words, the teaching on no self. And the teaching on no self is important, and how do we cultivate this? And here, the 2nd century Buddhist master Aryadeva says the following. The root of cyclic existence is consciousness, and the objects are what consciousness experiences. When you gain insight into the no self or no reality of the objects, that's when we will exterminate the seed that will give rise to existence. So in other words, many of the problems that we face that lead also to samsara existence really are rooted in the way in which we perceive reality. Although reality lacks independent existence or self-existence, we tend to believe in the appearance, and we follow after the appearances of things being real out there. And once through cultivation of wisdom, we begin to see the absence of such independent existence, then our tendency to grasp and our tendency to have attachment based on that grasping will be loosened. And in this way, wisdom will arise.
ene ngazo ba ro lo nge so de do si bo ngo ni ji dong ngo ni ji si zhe che si bo nang shi si be xuan zhe chang mo lo 지금 남둥이 리고도 지금 남의 리고도 지금 되게 직도 되게 리고로 되게 또 자연도 뭐 들으시는 말한소로 되게 응원을 여봐서 나는 시식이 때문에 매버지 다 죽도 와 시원 오니기 동스 다 오니기 동에 내주 대라 말한소 치질로도 돈이 애네 차단 걸로 로간다 지금 띠무 댄생기 애네 다 로드즈 제디 골레 연구 여빈주산에 시원 오니기 동어데 야고 저 상로 당도나 애네 된데게 시병오 정신이 동원데 야고 저 상로 가요 왜이나 시원오 니기도 오니기 시제체스 시보 콘데게 되베 처탐제 전경원의 주버시 때내 매버지게 타 쳐버지게 상로도 슬레 인도산에 오니기 시제체스 된데 인도다 나란저 그게 지금 동리가 따와도 상당히 저는 오니기 동 오니기 시제체 정신 다고 섬담배 시보 담보 접어 주로서 되게 아니 저기 초식네 되게 가는 나와라고 우주고 롱디 시원은 시 저니지 전부데 통다 보수도 개셔시 애는 안다 직제 되게 간다 이니 처남 된주든 낭신 나오다든 집에 로테 아니 간다 버게 나오다도 된되는 주고 때내 매버지 그 상로스 거인들 전에 아니 처남 오니기도 오니기 시제시 러시 타고 있으면 시보 담보 쳐버 교로 세니 아니 댄진 림베 댄진 파샤다 셔버 빵베 아니 냥대가 고방에는 것도 제토그래서 되게 로시실로고도 지체 가서 동해 상물단이 이 목대야데 멤버체 간다 동해에서 댄지기 지기여버다 댄지세야디 신유를 주로 록시인데 다디 지도 나오는 시 대중은 주로 멤버체가 코다 전이 윤두산에 애네 천은 대부분 낭시 낭어도 대부분 준비 애네 갈래 봐 슉슉는 라지게 땡아를 사샤네 네 냠는 전부도 연구미도디 얘네 전주고 섬다 탑기산에 전주고 섬다 시라고 산에 동리기 따와디 니지신도 난된션 상당히 상당배 락제게 다 제가로 니슈숨주 패지 상당벌에 저 년자리 상당도 전에 그 대성로야 요 처부로 되게도 봐.
So as I said earlier, one of the sources of problem is our tendency to believe in the appearance that we experience, our tendency to project onto reality things which are actually not real, and tendency to project independent existence. So as I said earlier, through cultivation of wisdom, at the heart of which is the teaching on shunyata, emptiness, one will also begin to recognize that our perception does not mirror reality, so that we don't naively believe and run after the projection that we experience through our perception. When we are able to do that, then this will free us from strong craving and grasping, and the craving is removed not simply because you wish it away, but by gaining insight into the nature of reality. So in this way, when you are able to remove craving, then the mind becomes pure. And that purity of the mind, that state, is nirvana. Nirvana is a state of mind. Therefore, earlier I said that what is required on the part of us as Buddhist practitioners is to really, pay attention to these dual processes. One is the process of deconstruction of our tendency to grasp, which is the practice of the wisdom, no self, emptiness, so that we free ourselves from grasping. The other is an active process of cultivation of qualities like compassion, such as I cited from Chandrakirti. So through this combination of cultivation of wisdom through removing ignorance and through this active cultivation of compassion, then there is a real possibility of attaining enlightenment as Buddha suggested. Therefore, it is important for us Buddhists, because otherwise, when we think about existence as characterized by suffering, if there is no way out from suffering, if there is no solution, then focus on suffering alone can be demoralizing. But the Buddha's message is ultimately a positive one. There is an end to suffering. There is a possibility of a freedom from suffering, and that is through gaining insight into the nature of reality and cultivating the qualities like compassion. And I can share with you that although I cannot claim to have deep experience myself, but I can share with you that as a result of reflecting deeply and practicing deeply over decades, it really feels there is, once you begin to get a sense or taste, that there is a sense of freedom that comes within you. So there is a real possibility of a transformation.
Tende Indusane, Umunjukwe Sigdi, Tedalotu Sejinawa Sejane, Rangalana Neve Guru Rashindu, Sisum de da Molu, Dene Gemebo, Tode Tanya, Tempedokin, Gobonro, Sage, Da Shinen Jogum de Ande, Shu Yunguminu, Mado Shen, Sig, Jolam Toyagi, Rawa, Tende, Leingudua.
So, the same author, Chandrakirti, also says that as you sharpen and develop your own qualities of the mind, and then the illumination of that, your own mind will, open up nature of reality, and through the skillful means of conventional truth, which is the method aspect of the path, then one will be able to travel to the shore of enlightenment. So, and an important part of that, which is a challenge, is to actually develop shamatha, the ability to maintain your mind completely focused and settled for a long period of time. And this is one area I still struggle myself, but still I feel that I'm able to make some progress in the direction that Chandrakirti is suggesting.
In the Shugde Umunjukwe Sigande Shugde, Tedalotu Sejinawa Sejana, Rangalana Neve Guru Sisum de da Molu, Dene, Todo Tanya, Tempedokin, Tadon Gobo, someday in Ro, Gomibala, Ninja, George. Tegon de Sungje Sanjian Jeni, Molubono Loya Pamarjawang, and the Shugde Guzutini, Shoyanka, Jago, Nangwe, Teni, Ngaway, Dundutane, Gaverung, Shugdoki, Gawayon, the Jazub, Horo, Chodon, Ro, Saturday, several Shugdua.
So, Chandrakirti.
Sigban Nashazan, Loda, Jajuna Lady Yorade, Ganda, in addition to Chanjuk, some the Tony Gitawa, some of the town yondu. Sig Rosale Mudua, Sendigalia, da Jolong Sig Tobiada, and Tinea, da Tonum the Vajakaman, Jolong Toguri, Sambasorsi, Loria, Such Tigidua.
So, Chandrakirti also says in that same text, actually the next verse, he says that how when you are able to gain deep insight into the nature of reality through the wisdom of emptiness, in fact, compassion will naturally arise for the beings who are suffering in the world. So the compassion for suffering beings is a byproduct of wisdom that is cultivated. And when one is able to cultivate this wisdom of emptiness and compassion, then one is equipped with the two wings, like a powerful bird. And then with these two wings of compassion and wisdom, one will be able to cruise the space towards enlightenment. So I truly feel that this kind of teaching and imagery that Chandrakirti is providing gives us kind of an optimism and hope as a practitioner. I'm in my late 80s now, and I still practice. And my hope is to be able to at least reach the second stage of the marga, which is the path of preparation, before the end of my life.
친주간에 사이나 저 검체 직지도 우차샤나 셰고 차 소쇼사들 친주간의 공구요래. 이래 다디 섬을 양어도 그게 구조 등에데 안데 샤마타보는 신기 동리가 나와다 장주 섬 디톤에 애니 섬을 양어는 전에게 구조 대응구도가 신 셰고차 소쇼 고마지고 되게 시라시라 소도 적으면 거.
So, in my own Tibetan tradition, as you know, there is also the Vajrayana, a tantric practice, which involves meditation on deity. And in my case, deity visualization has been an important part of my practice, even from my childhood, a particular form of deity, Vajrabhairava. But, to be frank, even though I do these practices, the practice where I really feel the greatest impact in my own mind is the cultivation of wisdom, and especially the cultivation of bodhicitta, which is the aspiration to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all beings, grounded in compassion. These are the two main practices that really seem to make a real impact in my mind.
세상에 들이대 아니 산재의 책 당하서 배 가서 그렇게 삼단이 다 달라야 그게 대바 장야체 또 시기에 인도산에 다 안다 말에 냠용부터는 뭐서랑 라랭게는 연도 식섬을 야 구조돼야다 요돼야 저기 아니 지 잘람지 톱돼야다 되거로지 미워를 치유 소시도가 자선가 태어나서 쳐도 넘어지네 다 공점니 상무단니 아니 갈래 섬 모르는 것이 아니 시시 되어지 차 아니 서무 대코나 이게 더나 야프게 로파 저기 전이라 로데야 저기 아니 나데다 로디에르는 야 곰그루 째버다 자선 결혼즈 다가는 시전에다 지금 서보다 자체에 쉬고 거기에 상도 니리신도 상당히 치매이나 요된된 루르 서땡에 지나서 쳐줘서야 아니 다 간다 저기 전조 송지기 돈에 아니 장주고 섬도 동리기 다 관여돼 장면이 숙견세 후다나쇼아.
So many of us who are gathered here are followers of the Buddha. We see ourselves as practitioners of Dharma. So the reason why I shared some part of my own personal experience and practice is to really bring home the point that all of us, each one of us, if we take our Buddhist practice seriously through cultivation through meditation, and the meditation really needs to combine both analytic meditation of deep inquiry into the nature of reality, understanding of compassion, and also internalization of that through meditative practice. So this combination of both resting meditation and analytic, discerning meditation is really the way to go. And if you are able to do this, you can really see a real difference even in your day-to-day life. Once you are able to cultivate a little bit of wisdom, you change the way you see the reality and your own existence. When you are able to cultivate compassion, then you really see the difference in your own day-to-day life. And those who are serious practitioners, if we dedicate more time to personal practice, we will also be able to have aspiration to attain higher levels of realization as well. So I urge all of you to make some effort.
나라도 남주 제 공부 차상서 부정아 동직በት 아니 동당야도更lin당야로 드저기 암조 사서 쉬고르디 그게 공자야 돌 사랑 지 아주 상단데 투쇼된데 주의를 소시도 다 가다 가도 nga bu zhe nga ge zhe nge bu de ji xiu ji ge da chou chi mu ru xia de go gu ge re de mi cha sang nga bo cha sang de zhe ge de ji go gu ge re de yin zhou zhou de ni ji xin du chang ju ge shen de dong ni ge da wa le ya sang wu da de ene changme shuk tabse huda nasho 대야 칸에 셰셔 지고 말에 된 나라랑가 냠용 터네 삼당 아니 세식be 고모로 그저 토도 시켜윤데 뭐나 전에 카요라에긴 요돼야지 연구도가 애는가도 부저시 수샤위네 데 더그즈기 구조돼야 또 가고래 엔데 창상을로야 지내 냠용 터네 다시 상담이나 뒤에 서버로 샤용도가 그래서 식성이 뭐 뭐냐 전에 서버로 샤용데 아니 처로 상월로게 아니 전조 순지기 돈에 아니 장주고 숨도 돈이 따와려야 그저 토도기 아니 상로다 나쇼 아선 나디 쉬야인 되게 엔다 간다지 최기 렉기 서르디 디 대창매 공부장 아니 후다 나쇼
So, of course, as part of our own tradition in the monasteries, there are also rituals that are part of the traditions. In the Tibetan tradition, rituals involve, beating drums and playing cymbals and all these kind of musical instruments. And of course, they are part of the tradition, but it is important for us to remember that is the ritual of these performance of rituals is not the most important one. Because if you focus too much on the rituals, the only thing that you get is all the noise these musical instruments create. Where we should really pay more attention and focus is the inner development, inner cultivation. And inner cultivation has to be done through, as I shared before, combination of this analytic and resting approach, resting the mind, focusing it, settling the mind, then applying it, and so that you can combine. And the focus of those two approaches has to be really cultivation of wisdom, some understanding of the nature of reality, and then cultivation of compassion, and particularly bodhicitta. And if we are able to do this, as I said earlier, in my case, they've become, if you spend some time on inner cultivation through meditation, these teachings become real, they become fresh, they become alive. It is, and in fact, by making these teachings come to life in you, you will really experience the fruits and the benefits of the Buddha's teachings. So, since many of us who are gathered here are practitioners, I really wanted to make this important point. So, also at the same time, urge all of you to, put more effort into your own daily practice.
독스탄 때 호브 갈 독스 때에나 내가 교부 주시하도가 저리 이내 자주고 섬도 동의가 따라 상로 도저야 봐 갱에 장주고 놈도 교리셔버 충분히나 지선 그 갱에 마음고 중에 저기 지금 섬나로려야 로지 용야다 아니 간다시게 남기 주야기 교리야 지금 신이 줘야 지기 사진의 인도 상매 아니 상로동다가 더네 아니 가다 장주고 섬도 동의가 따와라 슉 잡아야 돼 백해셔버리 아니 갱에 장주롱도 교리셔버 주나 아니 가서 강에 상원 세토 그래.
So I can also share with you that by engaging in this kind of inner development, and particularly focusing on wisdom and compassion, it really can help increase our courage as well. For example, in the case of my dealing with the current struggle and situation of Tibet, if you think just only about it from a narrow angle, you can lose your hope. But if you look at this crisis, look at this current situation from the broader perspective of the courage that the cultivation of bodhicitta and compassion gives you, then you can have a much more resilient mind. So even in your own life, day-to-day life, there might be problems which may seem enormous and unbearable. But if you have the courage that bodhicitta and these practices can give you, you will be in a much stronger position to actually turn adversities and difficulties, not be overwhelmed by them, but actually transform them creatively into opportunities as, further, assistance on your own path. So this courage coming from the practice is a powerful tool for transforming, dealing with adversities and transforming adversities into opportunities.
어다데 ngāshāshāna 도mek ene 사탄의 기회 밑다 보고 차대어리 ene 사사야래 슝디이드 도스 장 엔데 산줄레니 네 슝디이드 삼로 쇼 단데기 디 쇼지 그 로레야 판도 용대야다데 그 민동러신다 자자가 로 장고야사디 겸전디 소수 개변의 약수디 로 장배 토네 에네 용야지 다 상면에 후다 나로나스 샤인 엔터리 데 산제베 총고 산제베 총고리야 들데 어서 소셔 두스리 어데 미 출루 삼월로 미 가다 밀 편도야래 시라야고래 이네 심베 제조 송지가 토네 에네 제 터 가서 서버다 다시 수수도 상다 현대어디 패지 낭베슈기 캐주 서비스 패지 사대샤 당가라 삼월로 딘데게다 취수지 아저다 나란즈다 가서 그게 네 시게 파면에 마 유대베 취수차대요리 다디 rindan 임버지 모시베 토네 그저 톱두기 지금 냠렌션이 숙지기나 엔징 정원이 되가는데 주로 매워 요래 아니 주로 잠만데 요래 시 디디기 맹알이야 뭐네 지게다 왜 산제베 냠렌션이 지금 디디 뭐네 지금 카요라여기 지금 좀저로 거로 통야도 가서 뭐지 쇼나 데템베 샴딘 주리 때문에 거진 써야지. 산디 삼월로 공부하시 아니 후다나쇼.
So in my own case, I was a young child born in the remote part of Tibet, in the northeastern part of Tibet, and brought to central Tibet. And ever since, I had the opportunity to be schooled in the study of the Buddhist texts. And, many of these Buddhist texts are treatises written by great Indian masters, and which really present these teachings on wisdom and compassion. And I have personally found them to be deeply impactful while in Tibet, and especially ever since coming into exile. I have familiarized myself with these texts, contemplated on the content of these teachings, and I personally find them to be a powerful source, not just for personal practice, but also mental resilience, to give me courage. And I think this is really important to keep in mind. Today we have a large gathering of representatives from various Buddhist countries. This is an international gathering. Of course, Buddhism is one among many religions on this planet. Yes, all great major traditions of the world carry a message that is same, love, compassion, and so on. But I would say that what makes Buddhist, the Buddha Dharma unique is the richness of the resources that are found in the tradition for inner development, particularly through the combination of what I called analytic, approach and more concentrative, restful meditation practice. The meditation practice is very rich and aimed at transforming our own mind. So that, I think, is an important feature of Buddha Dharma. And if we, recognize this, and if we embody it in our day-to-day life, then the fruits of that embodiment will be obvious to everybody, not just to Buddhists. There are many different faith traditions in this world. There are also many people who do not subscribe to any particular tradition. But for all of them, if we as Buddhists can illustrate through our own life the benefit and value of Buddha Dharma, I would say this would be a service to the Buddha Dharma. This would be a way of saying thank you, expressing our gratitude to our teacher, Buddha. So this is something that I wanted to share with you.